In the year 610 AD in the city of Mecca, in what is now Saudi Arabia, a man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah was feeling very distressed about the condition of his people. There was polytheism and idolatry all around. There was violence, oppression, and polarization. In his grief over what his homeland was turning into, Muhammad began retreating into a cave to pray and meditate at night.
One night, when he was all alone in the cave, according to Islamic tradition, an angel appeared to him. The angel said to him, "Iqra," which is the Arabic word for read, and Muhammad responded that he couldn't read. Then the angel picked Muhammad up and started squeezing him. "Read," the angel said again, to which Muhammad again said, "I can't." This happened 3 times, with the angel squeezing harder each time and telling him again to read, and after the 3rd time, the angel recited the lines that are recorded in the Qur'an in Surah 96, 1-5. "Read, O Prophet, in the name of your Lord who created humans from a clinging clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught humanity what they knew not."
Muslims believe that this visit from the angel, whom they call Jibreel or Gabriel, marked the first of many revelations from God that were given directly to Muhammad, which were then dictated and recorded in the Qur'an. And these revelations, in turn, mark the beginning of the religion that would come to be known as Islam.
According to World Population Review, today Islam is the 2nd largest religion in the world, with approximately 1.9 billion followers as of 2020. Islam is the majority religion in East Asia, South Asia, North Africa, the Sahel, and the Middle East. Some well-known Muslims in Western culture include Shaquille O'Neal, Kyrie Irving, DJ Khaled, Bella Hadid, Hassan Minhaj, Zayn Malik, SZA, and Muhammad Ali. But what do words like Islam and Muslim even refer to?
Christianity is named after Christ, Judaism after the tribe of Judea, and Zoroastrianism after the 1998 swashbuckling adventure film The Mask of Zorro, starring Antonio Banderas. But Islam is named after an action. Islam means submission to God, and Muslim is the person that submits to God. The root meaning of the word Islam means peace, safety, and security. The Arabic word for peace, salam, comes from this root along with the Hebrew word shalom. So, submission to God means finding peace by following God. Around the world, regardless of language, most Muslims greet each other in Arabic saying, "Assalamu alaikum," peace be upon you.
This mention of peace brings up an important question. When you hear the word Islam, what comes to mind for you? Turn to the person next to you and discuss that.
For some people in the West, their first association with Islam will be with groups like the Taliban, ISIS, or Al-Qaeda. Part of the controversy with Islam is that these more radical groups see their violence as justified by verses in the Qur'an, as well as by Muhammad's own life. As one of the founders of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, put it, "Our prophet did not remain more than 3 months in Medina without raiding or sending a raiding party into the lands of the infidels to beat down their strongholds and seize their possessions, their lives, and their women."
On the other hand, many devout followers of Islam utterly reject these terrorist groups, and they also refer to the Quran for their rejection. As Muhammad Ali put it, there is nothing Islamic about killing innocent people. Of course, we could have a very complex conversation about religious violence and include parts of Christian history like the Crusades and verses from the Old Testament. But our goal in this episode is just to talk about the faith of the average normal Muslim. Because wherever you meet him or her, in college, online, or wherever, they are likely to be a very kind and peaceful person, even if their culture looks a little different from yours.
In my opinion, when she leave her house, she should be covered up.
Why do you guys not have to cover them? There's some beautiful men.
Yeah, there is some beautiful men, and I like your question, why don't the men cover? No, if you put a man and a woman, who attracts the most? The woman. The woman is the beauty. Woman is another definition of beauty.
In addition to the Qur'an, Muslims also revere the Sunnah and the Hadith, which are basically stories and teachings drawn from the life of Muhammad. It was for playing a remixed reading of the Hadith at her fashion show in 2020 that many Muslims became upset with Rihanna because they see the Hadith as sacred. But even more than the Hadith, the primary scripture of Islam is the Qur'an, which Muslims believe is the literal word of God. In the Muslim faith, the Qur'an is not on the same level as the Bible. The Qur'an is on the same level as Jesus. Its very existence is considered miraculous. This means that the teaching of the Qur'an is core to the religion of Islam.
The Quran is broken up into 114 surahs, which are kind of like chapters. Some are very long and others are very short, but they're all broken up into verses. One of the most well-known passages is Surah 2:255, which says, Allah, there is no God worthy of worship except Him, the ever-living, all-sustaining. Neither drowsiness nor sleep overtakes Him. To Him belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth. His seat encompasses the heavens and the earth, and the preservation of both does not tire Him, for He is the Most High, the Supreme.
In other words, according to Islam, God is eternal and sustains everyone and everything. He never gets tired. Everything belongs to Him. His throne extends over the heavens and the earth, and He is the greatest and most supreme being in the universe. This brings us to our next discussion question. Do Muslims and Christians believe the same things about God? Why or why not? Turn to the person next to you and discuss that.
In some ways, the answer is yes. In other ways, no. First of all, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, for that matter, all believe that there is only one God and that He is the greatest and most supreme being in the universe. He created everything, and His throne sits over everything. In that sense, Muslims and Christians agree. What's more, the word Allah is not just the name of the Islamic God, but is actually the Arabic word for God. In that sense, Christians and Jews who spoke Arabic would also be referring to God as Allah, just as Muslims do. But that doesn't mean their conceptions of who God is are the same, especially when it comes to the question of who Jesus is. We'll come back to that later.
There are 6 things Muslims have to believe to be Muslim, which are commonly called the 6 articles of faith. That there is one God, that angels serve Him, that He inspired holy books and that they are trustworthy, that He spoke through prophets, that He will judge the world, and that He predetermines everything in this universe. In Surah 4:136 it says, "Indeed, whoever denies Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day has clearly gone far astray." Some of the main ways Muslims live out those beliefs are through what are called the 5 pillars of Islam.
The 5 pillars of Islam are the basic acts considered obligatory, at least by Sunni Muslims. First is the Shahada, or the profession of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is God's prophet, which is sometimes translated as there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is Allah's prophet, which tries to make Muslims sound other and ignores the fact that the Arabic word for God, whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim, is Allah. Second, Salah, or ritual prayer 5 times a day at dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and late evening, which are obligatory unless you haven't hit puberty, are too sick, or are menstruating. Keep it PG, Thought Bubble. Third, Psalm, the month-long fast during the month of Ramadan, in which Muslims do not eat or drink or smoke cigarettes during daylight hours. Since Ramadan is a lunar calendar month, it moves around the seasons, and obviously it's most fun during the winter, when the days are shorter, and least fun during the summer, when days are both long and hot. Fourth is zakat, or almsgiving, in which non-poor Muslims are required to give a percentage of their income to the poor. And lastly, Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca that Muslims must try to fulfill at least once in their lives, provided they are healthy and have enough money.
Let's go over the first couple again in more detail. That first pillar, the Shahada, sometimes pronounced Shahada, is basically the entire teaching of Islam boiled down into one sentence. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. The Shahada is what's written in Arabic on Saudi Arabia's flag next to the sword. It means that Muslims not only reject polytheism, or multiple gods, but also the Christian idea of a trinity. And they believe that Muhammad came to show us the true way to worship Allah. In order to become a Muslim, you have to believe the Shahada in your heart, and Muslims have a tradition of reciting the Shahada publicly to announce becoming a Muslim.
In Muslim cities, each of the 5 daily prayer times is typically preceded by the Islamic call to prayer, which sounds something like this.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Although it's usually heard coming from mosques and not from the middle of talk shows, whenever Muslims hear it, they stop whatever they're doing, wash their feet, arms, and face, and pray facing Mecca. During these times, before they pray about anything going on in their lives, Muslims must pay tribute to Allah by reciting predetermined prayers and scriptures. Missing a prayer time is considered a serious lapse of faith for Muslims.
The fact that Muslims have to pray predetermined prayers at 5 specific times every day is one example of why Islam is sometimes considered a rule-based, legalistic religion, where their right standing with God is based on how well they follow God's rules instead of on the quality of other aspects of their relationship with God. The same thing could be said about the mandatory month-long fast during the days of Ramadan. Now, to be fair, many Muslims would likely respond by saying that true faith always requires discipline and action, and many serious Jews, Christians, Hindus, or members of other religions would likely agree. But this brings up the third question we want you to discuss. What role should discipline play in faith?
Christian theologian Tullian Tchividjian once said, "Legalism says God will love us if we change. The gospel says God will change us because he loves us." In other words, the difference between discipline and rule-based religion has to do with the reason why we might be devoting ourselves to certain religious practices. Is it because we're trying to earn God's favor, or because we're responding in love to a God who has already given us his favor?
Many of the Muslims I know are some of the most disciplined and generous people I've met. Every time I go to my friend Abdul's house, for example, he goes to great lengths to prepare food and drink for us, and always sends me away with several boxes of to-go food when I leave. As for the 5 prayers, I see real value in the idea of stopping my work or school day or whatever I'm doing to remember that nothing I'm doing matters more than God, and that everything in our lives comes from God. So maybe that begs the question, why am I not a Muslim?
Earlier, we asked you to discuss whether you think Muslims and Christians believe the same things about God. Christians don't recognize Muhammad as a prophet, and there's no mandatory pilgrimage, but there are obvious similarities between the religions. Prayer is supposed to be a regular part of the Christian's life. Jesus assumed that fasting would be too in Matthew 6:16, and verses all over the Bible commend tithing, hospitality, and caring for the poor.
The key difference between Christianity and Islam, though, is something we mentioned during our discussion of the Shahada. Muslims don't believe that Jesus was God, or that he died for anyone's sins. Surah 4:157 in the Qur'an says, "But they neither killed Jesus nor did they crucify him. It was only made to appear so to them." Surah 5:72 says, "Those who say Allah is the Messiah, son of Mary, have certainly fallen into disbelief. The Messiah himself has said, 'O children of Israel, worship Allah, my Lord and your Lord.'"
In other words, Muslims believe that Jesus never claimed to be God, never actually died, and essentially that Jesus came to bring the same message that Muhammad brought, that there is only one God and that we're supposed to worship him. But along the way, Muslims believe that details about Jesus' life got fuzzy, and that Christians wrongfully began to worship him as God also. Muslims see Muhammad as standing in the same line as the Bible, but as successfully completing God's mission, where Judaism and Christianity failed.
In a world that sometimes likes to pretend that all religions are the same, it's important to recognize that when it comes to what's essential about Christianity, namely the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, Islam and Christianity are far from being on the same page. As Christians, we reject the Muslim interpretation of Jesus. Although much about the discipline and devotion of Muslims can be inspiring to us, Christianity teaches that our ultimate hope is not in our own ability to devote and discipline ourselves, or in the unpredictable mercy of an inscrutable God, but that it was secured in the voluntary self-sacrifice of Jesus.
So as we continue to explore the major religions of the world, our hope is that it can be an encouragement to live into what is written in 1 Peter 3, where it says, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience."